The views, information, and opinions expressed during the following program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent the views of Access Communications, its representatives, or its employees.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll call the May 3rd council meeting to order. And first of all, this evening, under presentations, we have Mr. Larry Ward here from the Souris Valley Museum. You've got Brenda Matchett and who else? A curator? Mark, the curator, yeah.
Mark
good.
Benediano.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm glad you said that, Larry, but welcome.
I'm glad he told me.
Welcome, everyone, and please go ahead, Larry.
Well, I'm a little surprised that there's this many people here for my 3-hour speech. And being on the museum, I did dig out my old laptop.
Good.
Just to show you that we are into antiques. Anyway, I want to thank City Council for this opportunity to discuss our problems with the amount of monies that were allotted or apparently going to be allotted to us for the year. We were surprised to discover that after we had submitted our budget to you, and then you passed your budget, including our budget in it, that 3 weeks later we were told we were only going to get 50% of that. We thought it's a rather unfair, untimely, possibly an ill-conceived plan that has no promise of a resolution in the future. Like, we don't know where you're going, what you're doing. And we feel a lot of unneeded frustration and demoralization of the board and the staff could have been prevented if this situation had been handled in a more open and professional manner. If it hadn't been done behind what we think were closed doors in committee. So we've always had, in the 10 years that I've been on the board, a good working relationship with the city. And our past representatives, the Honorable Lori Carr and Lyle Yanish, were always very open with us and concerned for the well-being of the museum. And when there were changes or information to be exchanged, it was negotiated openly and honestly and to the full extent of their knowledge. And we feel that this time that didn't happen. We feel we were blindsided and unaware of the drastic changes that were coming, which will affect our programming and our yearly planning. As you know, our budget requests have not increased in the last 3 years. And the year before that, we worked with the city to reduce it roughly 20%. This time you want another 50%, which doesn't leave us enough money to pay our wages or the help. In the past year, unlike many organizations in the city and around the province affected by COVID, our curator, Mark, was able to create new opportunities for our museum and spread the history of Estevan and the prairie life of Saskatchewan pioneers around the province with virtual tours. As you've seen in the handout, he's been to over 35 schools. He's presented these tours. A total of 60 some altogether. He was still doing them today. We have a request for them in the fall. And he's been to Hudson Bay, to Swift Current, and places in between, Wapella, Regina, Moose Jaw. So we'd certainly like you to consider that when you're cutting the funding. And we think that he's probably done more during COVID to promote Estevan provincially than any other organization in the city, actually, funded or not funded by the city. So for those reasons, we fail to see why the Souris Valley Museum is being singled out to take the brunt of the third-party funding decrease, when we are not the reason that your budget is increasing, and using what we have wisely seems to be a punishment. We have asked our councillor, the liaison between you and us, what's happening in the future, but we can't seem to get that answer, what the plan is. We feel if there is a new plan coming in the fall, we'd like to know. We feel you shouldn't be putting the cart ahead of the horse. Like, tell us what's happening, finish this year off, start your new year. Makes sense to us, but as you know, we start, or maybe you don't know this, but we start our fall is our starts where we start to apply for grants and programs for the next year. So if we don't have any new information by probably the end of, I don't know, May, I can see us being at a real disadvantage. And if you cut, the proposed cuts go through, we not only lose that monies, but we also lose another $10,000 a year from the museum, cultural museum grants. Because as you've seen on the sheet here, we are now worked our way up to a Class 2 museum, which is $15,000. If we go back under $100,000, we become a $5,000 museum. And it's taken us 3 years or something to work up to that category. So it's it makes it tough for us to know which way to go and what to do when we don't know which way you're going and what you're doing. So if you could help us out with that, it would certainly make our life easier. It's our thoughts that, like I said, if the council wants to change the status quo, that it should at the very least have the new program in place. So as not only us, but the other organization at the city that have been in here making presentations to you over these cuts know what you're doing. And this is the time to adapt for the new, and give us time to adapt for a new structure. So if council can't get its new solution up and in place by the end of May, we will have to start looking at changes to our programs and our staff requirements. Certainly the summer jobs will have to be reevaluated, and the student works programs, because they're all partially funded by us. And if it's council's intent, which I don't know, if it certainly looks like it, if it's its intent to close the museum, please be honest and forthright with us now and tell us what you're trying to do. Because leaving us in limbo just isn't going to work for anybody. And the other organizations that you're attacking, it seems that your plan is all on the culture side. I don't know, did you make cuts to any of the sports, any of the other parks, anything in the city? Or is it just culture you're attacking? We think that we are helped to make Estevan a more diversified community by being there. I noticed that although our cuts were fairly healthy, that city council expenses were up 2.5% in their budget. And I've always been told, even when I was sitting here, that good leadership starts at the top. If you want the bottom to follow through and work with you, start at the top, make some cuts up top. When I was in the provincial government, we eliminated 2 electoral seats right the first year I was there. And that's the kind of thing you have to do to show where you want to go and where you're trying to get to. So if you have any questions, we'll try to answer them, but that's our concerns, and we think they're relevant.
Okay, well, thank you, Larry, for your presentation, and we do appreciate the job that the museum, the curator, and everyone on your board does. This is no slight to anyone at all. I think what we have here is a lack of communication. Councillor Vroba?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Ward. We haven't had the pleasure of meeting you before tonight. You didn't come to the original presentation. I think it's a bit unfair for you to think that we've had closed-door meetings or that our intent was to close the museum. That was not our intent, nor did we communicate that with the people that came here that day, that to be our intent. You're talking about taking away some jobs that you have 75% funding for from the federal government, right? Mm-hmm. So when your people came that day and they presented, they had quite a bit of federal funding that was coming their way. Mm-hmm. So if you have federal funding, you don't need the full percentage of the municipal funding, or so we thought. That is why we asked them if 50% would be enough. Their response was yes. We took that. Maybe it was, again, I'm hearing that maybe that was not maybe figured out. But I believe we also left it on the table that as the year progressed, we would look at it. And I think that not once did we say, can't wait to shut the museum down, or we're cutting your funding, and see you guys next year. We said we would work with the museum, and that is what we told the people that came that day. So I'm sorry if that is not the message that you got from this council.
Okay, thank you. We've got quite a few hands up. Councillor Walliser, then Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Your Worship. To further those concerns, I understand the feelings surrounding the cuts of frustration and disappointment because there has been such good work done by the museum. The decision that council made was made using budget numbers that were provided by your organization. We knew that your organization had qualified for the wage subsidy, covering 50% of last year's wages, which is an operational expense that typically the city covers partially for your organization. And why we chose to have the organizations back in March is because we knew that the organizations had additional information about what was going to be happening this year, so that we could help partner with those organizations and find that money that they required. And your organization has and continues to receive the wage subsidy and will likely continue to receive it until September at this point. And it was council's opinion that those wage subsidies would more than cover the shortfall created by the budget. And if it did not, that your surplus from last year could be used to cover the programming costs for the remainder of the year. Looking at the budget that was prepared for 2021, there was no income listed from that wage subsidy, and that is a substantial change to your overall budget for the year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Clark, then we'll go to Councillor Ford.
Thanks, Your Worship. Good day, Larry.
Hey.
One of the things I know that we considered was it was COVID and times were different. It was about, this is 1 year where we don't know what's going on, and we knew there was grants coming in and there was grants that were available, and that if they were coming from somewhere else, that it was a chance for us to say, well, we'll back off this year. It was sort of a 1 year time frame that we said we don't know how this is going to go. I don't believe we did consider the fact that when we cut the one grant, it would affect another grant. I'm positive that wasn't one of our discussions, and I would like to follow up on that. And is there a number that if we increased the grant that would let you stay as the Stream 2, which seems to be where the museum would like to be, is at that Stream 2? Is there a way that we can, where would we have to go to get you to Stream 2? Thank you.
I believe Melanie, who is, we're not sure, she might be under quarantine now, but I think she said 95. That's the 95,000 is where we have to be to stay in that group. I know we were just barely on the edge, just barely over the top to make it. That's why it's taken us 3. You have to kind of build into it, and that's why it's taken us so long. And I guess, I can get you the exact amount, but I'm sure that's the number she was using the other night.
Okay, you had a finishing comment. Go ahead, Councillor Park.
Is that the amount of grant that you get from the
That's the
city?
amount our budget has to be, not using our money. If you,
Federal money.
first day, like, we need that to come in,
So
we can apply as a museum too. Like, there's basically only 2 classes of museum, and it says 3 there, but the one is the Western Development, and then community museums, and the Royal Museum in Regina.
So
is a federal.
to get to that, we'd have to go from $50,000 to $95,000 grant?
You pretty much have to stay where you were.
Thank you.
And I know that the wage subsidies were part of that we had, but we have not wasted the wage. We have projects planned for the money. Like, we're not hoarding it. Like, we want to do what's best for the city, and we think that we're hoping the city wants to do what's best for us.
Okay, and I think you'll find, Larry, that that's the case. You know, we want to support and work with the museum to continue with the good work that they do. Councillor Ford, then Councillor Frank.
Thanks so much, Mr. Ward. I just have 2 questions and or comments. Why were we not informed about the SAS Culture Grant? Like, we sat in a meeting here and we were very open. The media was invited to come to this meeting. We had really good conversations about financials, and we did ask, would it be okay if we cut you 50%? How come nobody stood up and said, hey, we're going to lose something else?
Well, unfortunately, I was not at that meeting. As I understood it from the people that were, it was a last-minute request as they were going out the door. And that was not, it kind of took them by surprise, and that's why they were so upset, I guess, when they got back to the meeting. Was, well, we stood up to walk out, and they said, and you can do it on 50% less. They thought the meeting was over.
And I understand that, and I think there was a good opportunity for everyone to sit down and continue that conversation. I'm a little bit upset that we're being told that this is an ill-conceived plan when everybody had the opportunity to sit there and speak to us and tell us what's going on with the museum. And I think there was a great presentation, but in terms of funding, we should have been notified of that then while we were having that conversation, because it was an important piece of information to have known. My next comment is, I would say that this is not an attack on culture in Estevan, not even a little bit. We're looking to create a synergy within the city, within the culture groups, within the sports organizations, within every organization in the city that has a connection, to be able to work together with the museum, the art gallery, the art council. We're looking for everybody to step up this year during COVID and take this as an opportunity to be able to work together and find things that maybe you guys have in common, to be able to, run the same programming, but, with the same funding together, kind of thing. This is not an attack on culture. This was a chance for everybody to maybe say, hey, let's work together. And we're hoping to maybe create a committee to be able to, with the art gallery, the museum, all the culture groups, to be able to sit down and say, hey, this is what our group is doing this month, and this is what our group is doing next month, so you can find some sort of synergy together.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ford. Brenda, did you have a comment?
I was at that meeting, and we did our presentation, and as we were getting up, that's when Shelley mentioned that we were getting the cut to our to the museum, and basically it put us in a state of shock because we thought we were coming here to present, not to discuss whether we were going to get cut or not. So we basically walked out and discussed it a little bit in the front, but we had no idea.
Okay, Councillor Vrova, then we'll go to you, Councillor Frank.
Thank you, Richard. Brenda, do you remember at that meeting, though, that we said we could do this, and then in September, if everything gets back up and going and programs are running and more funds were needed, we could look at it then?
Yeah, but I think my focus was on the 50% at that point in time.
Yeah. And I can see that, but I guess, I kind of feel like every time we try and make a cut, when we see an opportunity, which we talked about with federal funding, it was not attack against culture. It was not attack against the museum. I think, Creighton Lodge, our people have gone to the museum. We think it's fabulous. We enjoy going out there. I think what you're doing with the schools is awesome. The numbers show. But I also think that when you're bringing in federal money or provincial money, and that shows in your budget that maybe, just maybe, You don't need the municipal dollars this year because you have the federal provincial funding. That's what we were trying to get at. There's no sense in giving the extra municipal money if the federal and the provincial have actually brought extra funding to the table. So that is why we said, would you be okay with the 50% cut at this time? Then in September, things get back to normal, projects start moving and you don't get the funding anymore. If at that time we could relook at it. So we didn't believe that we were doing anything to harm the museum. We felt that we were using taxpayer dollars wisely.
And then if the extra money was needed, we would step up to the plate in the fall, if it was needed.
Yeah, I know you did say that. That's
Yeah, it was never our intention to leave you guys hanging or to have anyone not have a job or to have any jobs cut. We fully understood that you guys are doing what you can to make sure the museum thrives during these tough times.
Larry, and then
Yeah.
Councillor Frank.
Just to address that, these times, that you keep referring to these times which have basically exploded for us. As I pointed out, he's been in done 67 tours in schools.
But it hasn't increased your costs any to do those tours. Like for what we're saying, we're talking about the budget. So during these times, which basically the federal and provincial dollars have come your way. Next year, those dollars won't be there, which means the municipal dollars will come back.
And I can't say for sure whether those dollars that have come in for COVID are, as, what do I want to say here, accessible for that other grant, for the $10,000 grant.
Right, so
I'm
that
not
would be
sure.
something that we could look into.
I'll have to
Yep.
talk to Melanie about that and see whether that's included enough, if that would help us.
Yeah.
And we'll work with your group to
100%.
to work that out.
And I think that's, sorry, just one more thing, is that I just wish if you guys knew that as far as I was concerned, I think the other council members hold this to be true. We want to work with you guys, not against you. And I feel like every time we try to find some way to make sure that we're being financially responsible, everyone gets so angry right away, where it's like they're going to come at us and tell us, maybe trim from the top, don't start at the bottom, don't do this, right? Like I hear it. However, that's what we're trying to do, is have it all come together so we use it the wisest. And if come September you guys are failing, and not failing, but basically need a little bit more money because we cut you too much, then that's on us, and we look at it at that time, and we did say we would look at it. We didn't say cut you 50%, get out of here and close that museum. Never our intention.
Okay.
I guess the answer I have for that cut is you wanted to go back or stay at 2020 levels. We're basically running on 2018 levels because we already took our cut 4 years ago. When Lau was our rep, he came and they said, we're having trouble, do you need all this money? And we looked at our budget and we looked at it and said, no, basically we don't need that. We can cut 20% off our budget. So we cut from 125 to 102, I think. And, we thought, well, we've done our share for a while anyway. And then when this hits you, you say, well, I guess I shouldn't have done that last time. And that's kind of the thought process you get into, like, you think you're done and you're ready to move on, and then, no, you're not. You're going to be stopped. And like I said, we don't know what you're planning. I said to Councillor Wolizek, I said, what's the plan in the fall? Is it a new plan? Is it going to work? Is it? And then I hear tonight that, Councillor Ford says we want them to work together as a group. Unfortunately, I had the privilege of being in this city on a group that we tried to work together. It's like pulling heads. We used to have a recreation board. Put the hockey guys, the figure skating guys, the ringette guys, and every other group that uses the ice into a room at once and say, look, we have to make this work better. Everybody wants their own little domain, and it's not always in the best interest, but I think if we're doing our share to try and keep our costs down, then why do you need that, really? It can work, but I don't think we're the ones to put it together. I think that's council's job. You're the guys sitting here collecting the money and making the money. We're just volunteers. And we're trying to do what's best and make the city, you know, out there. Put it out there. Put it in the front. Like I said, we've put it probably in more places this winter or this summer, spring, than anybody else in town. And Mark's already got things booked, or people wanting to book them for the fall in the schools around the province. Now, I can see if this catches on, we'll have to probably have another person just to do it, because as each grade comes in, it's obviously spread from the first one he did, and it's gone out to how to get to Hudson Bay, and teachers must be talking and saying, look, you can get this tour of pioneer life in Saskatchewan from Estevan, and you can do it during COVID. You don't have to, you know. So we think it's a benefit to the city, and we'd like to keep it going as best we can. We've also got projects. You look at that steam engine out there, when that diesel engine, when you go by, paint's just peeling off, and we had a guy lined up last year. It was going to cost us $10,000 to sandblast it, paint it during the COVID, when COVID first started, and he was out of a job and he was painting, but then he found some long-term employment, so that plan kind of fell apart. But we're still looking at, and that's a job that has to be done in the summertime and has to be done with funds. And the rest of those machines are going to need painting too.
Yeah, we totally understand, Larry, and you'll find us open, transparent, and willing to work through any issues that may arise.
Okay.
Councillor Frank?
So yeah, and thank you again, Mr. Ward, for coming and speaking. And I think one of the largest disconnects I'm hearing a little bit, and I just kind of wanted to just confirm my opinion on it, has been just in the wage subsidy. And that I know was a lot of the discussion as to where, like how I mean, it wasn't like we just said, 50%, just the heck with it. You know, the number came from that, and based on your financials from last year, where you got about 45,000 in that. And that also goes back to the previous councils did send out a letter to all of those groups when COVID first started, just saying, hey, we understand there's going to be some federal money, there's also going to be some reductions in costs, and we just want to make sure that we're keeping money in. And obviously we saw that as a surplus in your group last year. So I think where I would love to see more conversation in this. I don't think we're going to resolve this right this minute, but I do want to have more conversation, because I do appreciate everything you do. And I want to make sure that's very clear too. I don't think anyone, I'm not going to speak for everybody in this room, but I can feel pretty confident in saying no one in this room doesn't respect and love everything the museum does, because I personally think you do amazing work there, and I love it. That's why I have a piece of my own in that building now, which I'm excited about. What I would love to see for conversation going forward would be the one thing I think Councilor Verba brought up was, does that 45,000 or whatever will it work out to be this year in your wage subsidy work towards your phase 2 in your granting process through SAS Culture, and then just maybe even relooking at what your budget needs to look like to make sure that you are going to operate this whole year. We don't want anybody laid off. We don't want any programming cut. We want you to continue to operate, and just making sure that obviously we have to be concerned about fiscal responsibility on our end, and that's our job too. So that's where I'd love to see a little bit more conversation, and obviously that's going to need some more information from you guys.
And we'll ensure that takes place. Mm-hmm.
And
go ahead.
If I could just clear up, and the reason we feel, or I felt, this may not be the total board's, some of this is mine, what the board agrees with is theirs, and what they don't is mine. But when I felt it was done behind closed doors, I have still not seen a motion in public. I've seen the motion to accept the budget. I haven't seen a motion that says, let's reduce it by cutting back on third-party funding. It may be there, and I can't find it. I'm sorry if I didn't, but that's why we feel it was kind of done without anybody's knowledge. And then when our councillor says, well, there's a new plan coming in the fall, and we don't know what it is, and is it something that's going to cost us more money or less money, or where do we go? So that was that reason. And the only other thing I'll touch on here was the frustration and the demoralization of the staff and board. We have volunteer members now on the board that want to beautify that out there. They want to plant flowers and shrubs and do it all in their own time and stuff. And we'll help them with monies for the flowers and whatnot, but that's why we found it so demoralizing, and it kind of turned the board off.
Okay, Councillor Proba, you had a comment? And then
Yeah, I was just going to
Councillor
say thank you, Mr. Ward, for those comments. I can understand that because if there's anything I do appreciate, it's volunteers. I think that they're very hardworking, and I can see where sometimes you would feel like we put in all this hard work and now we're just getting told no. I hope after today you've realized that that was not our intention. Our intention was not to overlap municipal money with provincial or federal funding. I think Mark does a wonderful job. I also think that by reading the minutes of your, I guess it was your April 21st meeting, it says here that by going from stream 1 to stream 2, the difference in grant money is $5,000. So it would be more responsible for us to make a motion to give you $5,000 if you're in need of the $5,000 instead of giving you the $45,000 right now. Again, in September, if that comes up, that's where I think it would be a good time to do it. The motion for the third-party grants was actually made by Councillor Walliser, I believe, at the end of January, if not beginning of February. And it was a motion made to turn before we approved the 2021 budget, it took the third-party grants down to a 2020 level, and that also included with the new ones. So again, that's where the motion was made in case you are looking for it. It didn't have each third-party grant listed specifically. That is why we had all the third-party grant people come that day, was so that we could just discuss.
Just to clarify, that's why I couldn't find it then, is because you passed the whole budget later. So
Yes.
I assumed that when we were included in the whole budget, that's what we were working with. I didn't know you'd preempted it before you even passed the budget and then changed the budget.
Yeah, no, my apologies, and again, I hope you can take back to the board that we do appreciate you 110%. It was not our direction to close the museum, nor was it our intent. Our intent was just to try and make sure that we use our tax dollars wisely.
And just to clear up that 5,000, it is, as stated in this, it's 5,000 for one, 15,000 for two. So you drop the 10,000, you go back to the one again. That might have been an error in our minutes. Maybe
Yeah,
we weren't.
it says 10,000
we weren't sure. And it's not something you can get back the next year. You have to build back into it. So if you'd like to give us the 30,000 that it's probably going to take us to get back, then we'll all be happy. So we're putting her back where we started from, which if we'd have left it all alone, we'd have been fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Prank, you had a last comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch one quick thing too on what we're doing in the future. Just because I'm sure from anybody's perspective it's confusing, and that's mostly because we haven't totally decided yet. I think what we've discussed up to this point, which really has been pretty brief, has been that we want a more transparent process with all of our groups, that we want to have more communication in terms of what you need for capital, what you need for operating, and a lot of what that looks like is going to probably involve your guys' opinions of what that looks like. There's no discussion whatsoever about what funding you'll get next year, aside from, this decision was based on Susan. If that goes away, then you'd probably go right back to what you were. Again, I'm not going to speak to that because there hasn't been discussion, but that's kind of the mentality that we've had. And so I guess what I would probably also charge your board with would be a lot of what would you like to see from us in terms of that application process to make sure that it is fair and equitable to you, to make sure you're getting the full funding you need to operate properly and grow, because obviously we want that too, because that's something that's going to come, it's going to take a lot of work on our part in coming into the year and what that looks like. And so the more input you guys have and the more thoughts you've had towards it, the better it's going to be for us. So that's...
Okay, thank you, Councillor Frank. Larry, you have one last comment?
I think that you said exactly what our problem is. You said probably this is what's going to happen. That doesn't work. And when you're applying for grants in September and you're trying to get your program and get everything planned for the next year, probably doesn't do it. And that's why I said you're putting the cart before the horse. Get your new program in, get decided what you want, then make the cuts if you need to save them or if you think you can make it work better. No problem. Then we all know where we stand. We're not on iffy ground, and the ground's pretty sturdy then, and That's our problem. That basically is what you touched on. It's the probably. Probably this will happen, or probably that might happen, but maybe you'll get the money, but we're not sure how much. And we don't have much extra. If we have to start doing things for the staff or for paying wages, our money won't last probably till the end of the year. So that's where we're at. That's why I'm saying we'd like to know what you're doing.
Okay, and I think the bottom line, Larry, we'll have more communication, and we will ensure that at the end of the day, the museum's in good shape. We're not here to shut the museum down or anything like that. We appreciate the job that you guys do, and we will continue to work with you to make it one of the better organizations within the city.
Well, thank you for your patience, and I'm so glad I had this contract drawn up.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay,
again.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, moving forward, Trudy, would you mind opening the door and allowing city manager in, please?
He's in his office.
Oh, okay. Thanks again, guys.
Okay, thanks.
Keep up the good work.
Rod here for security or something?
Rod's part-time security.
I was wondering if he's walking about.
Rod does everything, why not do that?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I'm sure city manager will find his way back in. There he is. So moving forward, could we have a motion, please, to adopt the agenda as presented? Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Walliser. Any questions, comments? If not, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under minutes, could we have a motion, please, to adopt the minutes of the council meeting held on April 19th, 21? Councillor Vroba, seconded by Councillor Ford. Any questions, comments? If not, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under original communications, delegations, and petitions, we have with us this evening Kin Canada request for off-leash park, and I believe we have Jake Porter here this evening. Jake, if you wanted to set up to the mic and turn it on. And who's your counterpart tonight?
This is Adam Beck. He's the president of the Estevan Council.
Okay, Adam Beck, you're both more than welcome. Please give us your presentation.
Thank you. As submitted, we submitted a proposal to the city requesting permission to develop a dog park in Kin Park or Hillside Park within the city. Just to summarize, we've worked with the city on many projects within this park, and we're always looking for new ways to utilize the park and the space that we have. What we're looking at doing is expanding the fence in the northwest corner of the park, which doesn't have anything in it right now. So it'd go in between, basically the empty area, in between the pool and the rink. And all we're looking at doing is building a 6-foot fence. Roughly, we don't have it all staked out yet or anything like that, but it would roughly require about 350 feet of fence to be built. It would be built to any regulations that are present and whatever the city would propose be best to be built. We have some experience myself on the one that is now in Weyburn. It's the Weyburn Kin Club is actually running that now. So I do have some experience as to how it runs and what is involved in running a dog park, and I think that would be a good fit for our club. I don't know if you really want me to go through this whole thing or if you've read it before, but if you had any questions, we'd be more than willing to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Jake, and thank you for coming tonight, and we do appreciate the work that the Kinsmen do in our community. We've got a great relationship. We've completed lots of projects, and we look forward to more. Councillor Frank.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming, and thanks for all you guys do to come up with cool ideas like this. I guess but you may have already answered it. Not that I see that as a problem. I think anywhere that we can make dog owners happy is always a good thing. My first thought was that this might be too small of a space, not that that might be a problem, but you say you did one in Weyburn. Would it be similar size to what Weyburn has, and how does that work? Or
It would be a little bit smaller than Weyburn's. It is a fairly big area. I don't think that that it would be too small, in my opinion. It is a fairly big space. There is lots of room there, and I mean, it might be to our surprise as to how many people use it, and it all depends on usage too, but I think it's a place to start, and it might be something good that we could use that space for right now.
Okay, go ahead, Kirsten, Councillor Walliser.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did speak with a homeowner in the area because I think if there's anyone that has concerns, it would be those living closest to the park. And they actually told me that when they purchased their house, they knew they were going to be across from an outdoor rink and that they expected lights and noise already, and that they're quite happy to hear that the city's exploring an option where they don't need to get into their vehicle and drive their dog to a dog park. They think this is a really welcome addition to the area. So my request would be that we, as a council, speak with additional homeowners in the area, but I do think it's addressing a need that currently isn't available within city limits. Thank you.
Yeah, we totally agree with that, actually. I mean, I've been a dog owner myself, and I just see people walking their dogs everywhere. I think it would be a great way for dog owners, pet owners, just to be able to walk to a park, let their dog play, and walk home type thing. Nothing against the park that is already in town on the south edge, but for most people, they will have to drive there. So that requires you loading your animal, taking them there, and that's cumbersome as it is. And obviously, some people don't even have that option. So if there's an opportunity to do this where it's in the middle of town, it's very accessible, and that is one of the reasons why we decided to take on this project.
Okay.
I'd like to add just that
Go ahead.
the Kinsmen and Canets would both be very active in maintaining it, and it wouldn't take anything from the citizens or city to upkeep that park.
Great, appreciate that. And again, as I mentioned, you guys do great work within our community, and we've worked very well on other projects. Councillor Clark?
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess one of the things I just would like to touch base with is Parks and Rec. We also have a bike plan that's in the process. It may get approved, and maybe we've already got part of a plan where a dog park along the trail would be part of that. But I do think we need to include the Parks and Rec people just to see what other plans they have for that. I think there's a need for what you're doing, and just would like to open it to the if there's other locations that are maybe already being looked at and stuff as well. So just to make sure we've covered all our bases. Thank you.
Yeah, good point, Councillor Clark. Of course, we would involve Rod and his people. And Rod, I don't think you have an issue with this moving forward, correct?
Not at all, Your Worship. There were a couple of things that were brought up, one being the summer play park program being there. So if council is in favor of moving forward with this, there had to be a few changes like double fence lines where there's kids playing, stuff like that. The other issue that came up was around liability about dog bites, and our current bylaw does say you can't have them off leash, so we'd have to change that. And then we talked about whether or not the neighborhood would be happy. Like, I'm ecstatic because I know other areas right in that neighborhood are being used unofficially anyway, and we have to clean it up all the time, and it's quite a mess. Like where there's a bit of grass around a condo, well, that's where they take their animals. So if it were in a place that's already designated, I think it's a great thing. To Councillor Clark, we have discussed some other areas for sure. But again, we run into the issue of having to drive to those areas if it's on the outskirts of the town, of the city. So this makes total sense. There's a lot of dogs in that area for sure because I almost know them all by name. So I think it's a great thing, and I just want to commend Jake and Adam and the Kinsmen and Canets for all the work that you do. It's a great proposal.
Absolutely, and I think those 5 Irish Wolfhounds you own would probably like it too. Anyway, Councillor Broba.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's a great idea too. I would totally support this idea, especially what Councillor Clark said. If there were other areas of the city that became a dog park, this one would be unique to me because it wouldn't be the city having to look after it. The Kinsmen do a great job of looking after that park, so I would support this, but I do agree with Councillor Walliser that it should probably go in the paper for a little bit of public consultation or feedback, just so if anyone in the area, if there was too many of them, had some questions or concerns, we could answer that for them before we proceed.
Yeah, and that would be a matter of course, Councillor Brobo, we would canvass the neighborhood and make sure that, everyone's okay with that. So what's the will of council? Any more comments? Do we have a motion then to move forward with those caveats? Councillor Frank?
Yeah, I'd make the motion that we would move forward, that our parks manager continue to work with them to make sure that all the concerns are addressed and that we would, move forward.
Okay, thank you for that. Have we got a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Cernick. Any other further questions or comments? If not, all in favor? Carried. Well, there you go. Thank you so much, Jake and Adam, for coming tonight.
And thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Look forward to working with you.
Absolutely. Okay, next, under original communications, delegations, and petitions, we have from the Rotary Club of Estevan, the Lobster Fest request and usage again of the curling facility. So what's the wish of council on this? It was very successful last year. There's a few Rotary members here tonight. Councillor Frank's wife is running the show. She does a very good job. And it's a great organization. So what's the wish of council for this to happen again? Councillor Broba.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question for Councillor Frank, if he'd be selling tickets again?
Yeah, I'm unofficially selling tickets. The
Perfect.
Rotarians come to my office and pick up the tickets, and somehow some stragglers come in and buy them. But I would recommend people go to A&A Jewelry is the best place to buy them, or
Okay.
contact your fellow
Yeah.
Rotarians. So
I would definitely
if you
support
run
this.
into me, I can sell you some too.
Okay, I missed out on tickets last time, so I want to make sure I get some. And so yes, if acceptance and approval, that we let them use the curling rink.
Okay, thank you. Have we got a seconder? Okay, Councillor Walliser. Any further?
Sorry, that was no charge, right? The Rotarians were not going to be charged for that?
Right.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that in the motion.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? If not, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, next, under original communications, delegations, and petitions, we have the Estevan Bears U18 Valued Corporate Sponsors request. And that's a very nice letter from the Estevan Bears thanking us for the city's support. So I guess all we need, City Clerk, is just an acceptance of the correspondence.
And a plan?
What's that?
And a plan?
And the plan moving forward?
We don't have to do a 3-year contract with them.
Yeah, we have a 2 or 3, yeah, 3, I think. 2 more.
years left on a 3-year
Yeah,
contract.
exactly. Okay, so I guess acceptance of the correspondence? Okay, thank you. Councillor Cernick, seconded by Councillor Frank. Any further questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay, next, under original communications, delegations, and petitions, we have from the pro-life benches. We've got one out there, a discussion. I guess they would like to put up 4 more benches. What's the wish of council on this? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Your Worship. I do have concerns over the request from Pro-Life to install the benches in city parks. Benches have been donated from organizations or businesses in the past. In this case, I believe we're being asked to take a position to allow our parks to be used to promote issues that are either political or moral. And I do not feel I was elected to take a position on subjects that are not in our jurisdiction of the local government. If we open the parks to making a statement on an issue, we will open it to all issues, and it may create an unnecessary division within the community. I prefer our parks to not be used for this purpose, and I would like to make a motion that we ask a pro-life organization to withdraw their request to install the benches in city parks and allow us to remain neutral in the parks. Thank you.
Okay, what's the wish of council? Have we got a seconder for that?
I'm just going to, can I speak on it? Or?
Sure, go ahead, Councillor Groves.
Well, I was just going to say, I actually, when I first heard, I think we've done this for a few years, I didn't put much thought into it because I believe that people have the choice, whether they're pro-life, pro-choice, whatever. They can decide how they go. However, I did have 2 people speak to me, and they also asked why the city was putting pro-life benches in. And I said, because they asked. So it hadn't come to council, so I guess now that it has come to council, 1 bench has already been installed then, and they want 4 more. And they want them all to be at the...
Yeah, we can let Rod speak to that. Please, Rod, go ahead.
You want to meet Mike?
Councillor Verobosa, 3 are ready to be installed, and there's a request for an additional 4. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess if I could just, for what it's worth, personally, I don't have a problem. I do understand it could be construed as a political statement. I would think if people wanted to put pro-choice benches up, I mean, as long as it's tactful, it isn't demeaning. I don't know, it's a free country. To me, it's not a big thing. I mean, if someone wanted to put a Liberal bench, heaven forbid, or an NDP, if they want to pay for the bench, I have to be honest, I wouldn't mind it either. So, I don't know, it's totally up to council. Go ahead, Councillor Wallis.
Thank you, Your Worship. My concern is less in this sponsorship specifically, but rather looking at the broader picture of how does the city decide who purchases sponsorship and how do we ensure that that sponsorship is done consistently. So for me, when I read the Mercury, I thought, if this bench just said sponsored by Estevan Pro-Life, I probably wouldn't have had that hairs on end feeling. But because the bench has a slogan associated with it and it doesn't actually indicate who that funding was from, I agree with Councillor Clark that it does seem like that message is being provided by the city itself. So moving forward, what I would like to see is that the city does develop some type of policy that covers sponsorship, naming rights, and advertising. I know the city of Regina has come under fire for some discussions about their policy, but it does provide that second look. It flags any potential concerns so that it can come before council before decisions are made, but it also gives a pretty clear rubric for those staff members of City Hall to look through and see if they call it an ethics scan, if this is something that the city does want to align itself with by using that sponsorship in their parks. Thank you.
Okay, any more comments? Councillor Frank.
I was just curious if anybody knows, are the other benches that are proposed already made or not? Because I've been considering this, and I actually don't mind the slogan. It's not very blunt and in your face. Maybe it's more of a slogan that they use, and I'm not actually very up on either terminology in those. But I think a plaque that says sponsored by would be less of a political statement, more of just an acceptance of a donation. So that might be, because I definitely see the issue on this. And I see both sides to it. I don't disagree with you, Your Worship, that we kind of have to decide through this, are we going to accept donations from competing political stances or just not accept at all? Because that is really what the issue here is. I don't think anybody's trying to take a side on this debate. It's more just that, do we or don't we? Because I know that's the comments I've heard right away as soon as this came out, was that groups from the opposite side of this argument have said, well, then we would like benches too. So I think if it was more just a plaque that just said sponsored by, it could be a little bit easier to do that, whereas putting messaging on might leave us into a lot of constant battles as to what's acceptable and what's not. So I'm just curious if we know if any other benches are made or if it's too late to ask that of the group.
To my knowledge, only 3 have been manufactured locally here. The other 4 have not.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cernak.
Thank you, Worship. The picture isn't very clear. What does the bench actually say? Always loved? So I guess that goes along with, the message isn't where if you have sponsorship by pro-life, that kind of does, but would you know it was pro-life, seeing the bench the way it is right now? Which is, I do believe it's done in good taste, and I kind of also agree that it is still a free country, and you know what I mean, sponsorship or advertising is the way out there as long as it's done in good taste and doesn't break any laws. I think it should be allowed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vroba.
So I do agree with Councillor Welliser, though, there should be some kind of a guideline, because I think what we lose track of a bit here is, like, it is a free world and we can say what we want, but I think we just seen a lot of controversy on Kensington and King on the sign that had an anti-mask sign on there. They had some advertising for free the children, free the mask.
Now, Councillor Vroba, we had no involvement.
No, we had no involvement, but we also seen how another company spray painted their name off of there, right? So I guess that's my concern, is if we don't have a policy and a procedure on how to accept sponsorship or advertising, then who is deciding what is getting put on there? Is it pro-life, pro-choice? Are we going to have a pro-choice bench right beside the pro-life bench? Are we, like, I think that's the whole question here, is how do we decide what benches we are accepting and where they're placed?
Okay, so what I'm hearing, as long as it's not from an illegal organization, it's tastefully done, the writing on it is not inflammatory, and they have a small donated by somewhere on the bench. Is that what we're getting at? Councillor Fort.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to go with Councillor Vroba, and Councillor Welliser, I do agree that we should have some sort of plaque. I personally don't agree with the fact that we do have that slogan on that bench, just for the sole fact is, I just don't want people to be uncomfortable coming into our parks, because what may be comfortable for me may not be comfortable for somebody else. It just, what is the line on those slogans that is going to upset somebody who may be taking their kids to a park, who might be walking with their families or whatever. And, I'm not here to decide who should believe in what, but I do wonder also what the line is on those slogans and what people or groups are going to be paying for. And I'm not saying anybody's going to put anything defamatory or anything like that, but it's a big gray area, but I think we should decide on what that line is, or what we should be able to put for slogans, or we just put benches, say in memoriam of whatever, or sponsored by so-and-so, and just get rid of those slogans completely. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Clark?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess my motion was for them to withdraw their request, and if we could add to that, then we could come up with what is allowable in the parks. I do believe that if we say this is okay, then I am quite prepared to say everything is okay. I'm not going to make any judgment on it from here on, but if this is okay to put a bench in, then it's okay for everybody to put something in. And I'm not going to judge on whether that's the right thing or wrong. But that's all I'm asking, is that we not go this far and start making things into the park where we have to continually say, well, that's allowed and this isn't allowed. So, thank you.
Okay, so just to try to get consensus, could we, moving forward, have nothing on the bench, just a bench, and a small insignia sponsored by? Would that be in keeping? Would everybody be okay with that? Okay, would we have a motion for that?
So first we have to deal with.
There's a motion here on the
Yeah, well, we
floor.
don't have a seconder, so we don't have a motion.
So do you want it to fall?
Do we have a seconder? Otherwise, that will fall. Okay, we don't have a seconder, so do we have a new motion reflecting what we've talked about? Councillor Frank?
So I would make that motion, because I do agree with you, Your Worship. I think that's probably the safest way to go about this consensus-wise would be, so my motion will be that all sponsorship of benches in our parks would only allow for a small plaque that insinuates who sponsored that bench, with no slogans or messaging.
No affiliation.
Yeah, no, yeah, it can say who sponsored it, so if it was the pro-life group, that's
But
perfectly
they're all
acceptable.
plain benches moving forward.
But it's just a plain bench, yes.
Okay.
And would that be our
Have we
policy?
got a seconder? Okay, thank you. Councillor Cernick. Any further discussion? Councillor Waleser?
Your worship, do we also need to make a motion looking at a policy moving forward in case somebody decides that they would like to sponsor a fence and put up a slogan on the fence?
Sure, I don't think that's a bad idea. Why don't we do that? We can strike up a small committee and, you know, maybe see what some other communities do some comparisons, and we can have that discussion on council. Councillor Vrobel?
Yeah, because I was thinking now, like, okay, you see the milk in the cities, you can drive by, it's like, got milk, or, you know, they got their little slogan up, right? I guess that's advertising. So that's where I do agree, we need to have a policy or procedure in place so that we know how to deal with each one. Maybe it, you know, who is actually deciding right now? Is it the management that's deciding? Is it council deciding? Like, I think that's where the policy and the procedure needs to come in. I think for this time, because they've already got the benches done, I don't know if there's a slogan already on the benches.
Sorry, it was the picture that the city manager had sent. I think you sent
I
that
missed
around,
that.
Jeff?
Always loved, yeah.
Always loved.
And that is on the 3 benches currently constructed, so
So are they going to, like, that's what I guess we're saying right now, is that they're going to have to reconstruct these benches to just have a small slogan on it, or a small logo on it.
Well, see, I thought moving forward, but I guess, I don't know, would that take much? Maybe just one latch to take that sign off? I don't know. I think it's
it's a design that's plasma welded right into the...
Okay.
Yeah, I missed this completely.
So the back would have to be replaced.
yeah.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't know what that stood for if I've seen that. So, yeah, that's a tough one.
So anyway, I believe the motion says, City Clerk, moving forward, we'll just have a small insignia representative of who paid for the bench, correct?
Right.
And then, and then along with that, we'll set up a policy. Councillor Frank?
Well, you're correct that would be what I would have said in my motion, but I'm giving this consideration that I don't know if that's what we want to do moving forward, that I can sit by with these 3 existing. It just seems silly to have allowed 3 to go in and then change the policy. Yeah, I don't know that I would want those 3 to go in and then just say, well, they slipped under the crack. That just doesn't seem fair to any other groups. So, I don't know if anybody has any suggestions.
Councillor Ford?
Thanks, Your Worship. Do we know of any other groups who have submitted something to be put on benches?
I don't think so.
Over the past 3 years, mostly commercial type sponsorship. For example, No Frills just donated $500 toward a bench, so we put a little plaque donated by No Frills. A couple of individuals have done the same. And we basically installed benches that I've already had, which are Blue Imp, which matches everything. In this particular case, and it's the first time, it's quite different than the cemetery where there's different rules under the cemetery bylaw. But this is the first time that someone's come and requested a different design of a different bench that was manufactured locally.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Frank?
So 2 questions to this then. Rod, do you have any more Blue Imp benches in stock that could be installed that we could put plaques on in lieu of these benches?
I don't have any in stock right now.
But we could get some sort of. I guess then my question that's going to be relevant to this that we're not going to get an answer to tonight would be whether the group wants just a small plaque. They might have been quite clear that they wanted this whole messaging, which means maybe that our parks aren't the right spot for them. Maybe they want to be somewhere else. That's their decision, though. That's not ours. I guess if our policy is that they get a plaque, then I would be quite grateful to, even if we just replace them with our own benches, and they had to take these elsewhere or do something else with them, that we would still be because we said yes already, we would recognize them with those plaques. I think that's very fair. So I guess that would be the change to my motion then, would be to say that it wouldn't be going forward. I can't change it. Okay, well then I won't change it, but that's my thought, is that I would say not going forward, that we would, I guess we could still let my motion go forward and we could make a different motion for what we would do with these three. I don't know if that would work. I don't know. City clerk's
The motion's on the floor.
Can you read the motion back or something, vote on it maybe?
Without sponsorship of the benches in our parks, we'll have a small plaque that was not
So it doesn't say going forward at all, so it's still valid.
Rob?
Yeah, Your Worship, just to correct something there from previous, and this was before my time, but I do recognize that down in Churchill Park, there are benches with IHH built right into them as well. So I forgot about that. And I know the Lions Club has a nice camera lady just reminded me. The Lions Clubs have also requested to put one in, but that's outside the Nicholson Center, and it's fine. It'll be fine there.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Groba.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to say, I personally would like to see your motion fail right now, because I think that moving forward, what needs to happen is a clear policy and procedure discussion and invention of it before we decide what happens with any benches. So I would like to see these benches not be placed in the park, but that will be discussed after your motion's voted on, I guess.
Okay, so the motion is, and you can clarify, Councillor City Clerk, if it's not true, that moving forward, the benches will have a small insignia of who sponsors that bench. And then we'll also work on getting a proper policy in place.
That wasn't part of the motion.
Okay,
Just the
I thought it
slogan.
was,
There would be no slogan allowed.
Okay, and that's moving forward. Okay, so we've got the motion seconded by Councillor Cernick.
Yes.
Okay, ready for the question? All in favor? No, I guess no one's in favor. Okay. So have we got a new motion?
I would like to make a motion that we develop a policy and procedure regarding benches with advertising, sponsorship, or any type of logos put in our park, and to be brought back to council.
And then what about these benches that have been made?
I think we could do that maybe on a separate motion, should we?
Well, no, you might as well include, what did you want to do with the existing benches?
I think we need to go back to the group and ask them if there is another location that they have in mind on maybe a private business or someone who's willing to put that. I do believe that looking at this sends a message that the city of Estevan is pro-life. And I think that's part of the issue when we're dealing with the city, is no matter what anyone in this room believes, how we believe, what our personal values and beliefs are, should not come to the table right now when voting. It should solely be non-biased, non-partisan, so that would be my motion.
Okay, so did you want to read that motion, City Clerk?
Want me to say it back? Yeah.
Policy will be brought back to council on how to handle sponsorship. I think we need to go back to pro-life and see if there's a different location that these benches can be installed. In council, it needs to be non-biased.
Okay, we've got the motion by Councillor Groba. Is that a seconder, Councillor Frank? Okay, ready for the question. All in favor? Okay, carried. Okay, next, under written reports of committees, we have from the Souris Valley Museum, minutes of March 17th and April 21st. Do we have a motion for those? No? Okay, Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Cernick. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Next, we have under written reports of committees, the Estevan Bruin minutes from April 12th. Do we have a motion for those? Councillor Ford, seconded by Councillor Walliser. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, under executive reports, we have from the city engineer, the tender for the water main replacement and roadway rehabilitation. Go ahead, city manager, speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So under different programs of the provincial government, we put applications in based on what we're allowed to. So under the Urban Highway Connector program, 4th Street is designated as an urban highway connector. It is the oldest street that has been paved and would be the newest that would need a rehab under this program. We did get approved for the funding for this for 50% of the cost. So you'll see in the report from the city engineer of what the request is. So this was not confirmed as of time of budget discussions. We do feel in operationally we can make a few little changes there that we can bring back to council so that we're not foregoing the $570,000 provided to us by the province. And I can bring that to council along with potentially some other applications we have that coming through that we may need to adjust some of those budget discussions. Okay. But in regards to awarding the actual tender for the work, if we can move that forward so that we can start planning, and then at the next meeting we can bring some options for council to adjust the budget as was presented.
Okay, thank you, city manager. What's the wish of council? Councillor Clark? You so move. Okay, we got a seconder? Okay, Councillor Ford? Any further questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay, next, under executive reports, we have from the tax assessor, the tax assessment, the trending of the tax assessment. So, Trina, thank you for coming tonight. Who wants to take this file? Yourself? Yep. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So we're legislated by the province. Oh, sorry. Newbie. Okay, so we're legislated by the province to do a revaluation every 4 years. So these values are representing a base date of January 1st, 2019. Our previous values are using a base date from the 2017 reevaluation using a base date of January 1st, 2015. So it's just showing the trends. It's showing that in most every class, the assessment has decreased. The biggest probably decrease is probably our multi-residential as well as our commercial properties. So this is last, 2020 taxable value, which is which is the 2017 reevaluation was 1.5 million, and now the taxable is just over 1 million.
Okay, well, thank you, Trina, for that. Any questions or comments from council? City manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to add to that, so the second page, I know we have got a couple questions from the public as well as from council that my assessment on my house went down is that to assume that my taxes will go down. So this is to show you that second page that if we don't adjust the mill rate to be revenue neutral is what usually happens in a reassessment year, we would have to borrow an additional $5.3 million this year to operate with even a zero, that's considered a zero revenue increase from our end. So as with every reassessment, there's winners and losers, and you could still have a 75,000 reduction in your house, but if it's higher or lower than the average, you could still see a tax increase once the mill rates are set. So I know over the next couple of weeks we're going to be coming up with a bunch of examples to bring to council for different rates and different houses to move that discussion forward. But just so that the public knows that even though there's a decrease, it's not automatically that your taxes will down, because we do go revenue neutral and adjust it.
Okay, thank you for that, City Manager. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Your Worship. Jeff, could you explain about the 85% that they've changed on there from I guess it's from the government or whatever?
Yes, Councillor Clark. Trina, could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so every revaluation, the assessments are presented to the province and they set the percentage of value. So previously, commercial and railways were assessed at 100%. Taxed at 100% of their assessed value, and this year they changed it to 85% of the assessed value. So it's showing a reduction for commercial properties just due to the percentage of value by 15%.
Okay, thank you, Trina. Yeah. Any other, go ahead, Councillor Frank.
Sorry, and so I was just going to maybe make a statement there just so that people are aware that by going revenue neutral, most people should see pretty much exactly what they had, assuming there wasn't giant fluctuations of what their value is. Now, is it going to be quite, I guess that would be my question to you then, City Manager. I know the last assessment we had quite giant fluctuations in values. Is that going to happen again this year, does it look like? Are you predicting that?
Thank you, Councilor Frank. So it looks like some of the big concerns that we had last year was definitely in the industrial warehouse, and some of that has been corrected. You can tell by the trending which ones have decreased more, but again, there's winners and losers in every class. We pulled them in everything, and unfortunately we can't make a million tax rates to do those winners and those losers, so we'll be coming up with scenarios that try to equal it out best possible. I know even looking at residential, we're trying to get it to, just based on some examples, half are a little higher before, half are a little bit lower in different classes. So we'll be working through that, but no, it's not as clear across the board as we would like it to be, and the calculation from SAMA is always very confusing to decipher.
And if you ask questions of SAMA, it gets more confusing.
I've been there.
Okay. And, Councillor Broba, then Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to say the same thing. I've had a few calls come in, express, some of them are quite concerned with how low their assessment has gone. And again, it's based on trends, so what your house might have sold for in 2019 or what houses around you in that area sold for in 2019 is how they came up with the assessment. So I remember 4 years ago when this reassessment year, and there was winners and losers there too. And when we talk about that, it's literally because it all depends on where your business or home, which category they fall into. And so hopefully we can make sure that it's revenue neutral and that the mill rates don't affect anyone too drastically.
And we've got our two best people on it. So we have faith. Councillor Walliser.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is regarding the provincial funding. So the province would have anticipated that by only allowing the taxable value to be 85%, that would result in a decrease of municipal funds to the cities. Has there been any discussion about how the province is going to offset that on the behalf of the municipalities?
Okay, thank you. City Manager.
Thank you, Councillor Walliser. So from the school side, as most people know, about 35% of your taxes is for school taxes. They did adjust the school mill rate slightly from, I believe, 4 point...
Yeah, for residential, 4.16 to 4.46, I believe.
Yeah, so that assessment reduction can directly impact the provincial portion of your taxes. Obviously, under the city portion, we try to get to that revenue neutral amount, but no, we have not heard from the province how they expect to cover any of that shortfall on the provincial level.
And we look at that, Councillor Walliser, just like when they bring in regulations that cost us money, they don't bring the funding with them. That falls on us, unfortunately. Okay, any other questions, comments? If not, moving forward from land development, we have the downtown residential parking issues. We have with us today Richard to maybe go over that. And we have our bid president as well. Go ahead, Richard.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
And Barry, did you want to sit up beside Richard, or no. You don't want to get that close? Okay. No, I fully understand.
I've not seen too many times.
Okay, no problem. No problem, Barry. Go ahead, Rich.
Good evening. What this is about is there's 5 parking lots owned by the city in the downtown area, and within those parking lots, commercial parking for businesses and employees are managed by the bid organization. We also have a handful of residential users in those that use those lots, and those are handled through my department. And it's been a not successful issue the last few years. What's happened is certain individuals might get confused as to whether they need to go to bid for parking or go to us. We'd have situations where we'd have agreements with the landowner of an apartment block, which did not work as well as could be expected. And so what I've done is I had some fairly extensive consultations with bid and with shared services and our bylaw control to come up with a system that would probably work. And what we'd like to do, what we're proposing to do, is mimic to a certain degree what BID is doing with the commercial. So if you're an employee of Dolly Sue, Dolly Sue is responsible to get your commercial parking pass. If you're a residential person, instead of the apartment block owner being responsible to get your parking pass, the registered owner of the vehicle will be responsible. And that would be administered out of our downstairs. And we think that's going to be a lot easier to manage and a lot easier to enforce as well, because we'll have a lot of liaison with bylaw control. We had a request on here as well, and this is something that we're looking for council direction, if you're okay with this proposal. At this point, BID, at least in our conversations, has been supportive of this approach, as well as bylaw control and shared services. We did have a request for a reduced rate for people that are in social services. And we would like to keep away from that, because for auditing purposes, if we, say for example, gave a person half price because they're on social services, we'd probably have to have some documentation to satisfy our auditors why we're, and then that opens up a whole can of worms. I'd rather just not go there. I don't like to have information like that within the city that's subject to our freedom of information. So what we could do potentially for this year is just modify the parking rates accordingly. The current residential rate is $600 per year per vehicle. The bid rate for commercial is $120 per year per vehicle. As a idea to get for a basis of discussion, shared services in my department were suggesting $300 a year for a residential vehicle, or $50 a month. And they would have that choice. If council is agreeable to pursuing this option, this proposal, then our next step is going to be to have a sit down with BID and bylaw enforcement, and also our marketing people, marketing team, so that we can come up with placards for the city, which will be similar to what BID has, but not confusing, if you get the message there. And then then we could go ahead and implement this. The parking rates would typically be included as part of our general fees bylaw. And so I'm just wondering, if council finds any merit with this proposal, or whether we need to go back to the drawing board.
Okay, well, thank you, Richard, for spending time and energy on this. I think it looks good. What's the comments? Councillor Frank?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and to Richard, I think this looks great. I like the idea of having a placard in the windshield. I think that's a lot more clear and concise way of being able to police this and ensure it. I just wanted to confirm, though, that this would encompass the parking lots, but not the street, right? This would not allow you parking on the street, or would it?
These placards would only be on the downtown city parking lots.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Your Worship. Are they transferable? So if a person gets a different car, then do they come back in and put a different, they're tied to your license plate? Is that how it is? Or do they come back, if they sell their car and get a different car, do they come back in and transfer it?
Yeah, in the discussions that I've been having some ongoing discussions with bylaw control on what's the absolute minimum amount of information we need in order to conduct enforcement and to ensure that the system is running smoothly. The idea was, yes, if the vehicle owner changes vehicle or gets a rental, they can just take the placard off and give it and put on the new vehicle. At the same time, what we want to avoid is situations where a person pays for an annual pass, has it on their vehicle, moves away, and then just, hey, for $100 I'll give you the last 6 months annual pass, and then it winds up in a strange vehicle. So the paperwork that we would have at City Hall for when we're giving out these passes I would imagine, there's going to be something like the license plate number plus the person's name and contact information. But that is something that we'll be refining as we go through this process because I want to have the absolute minimum amount of information possible, but also has to be effective.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Councillor Vroba?
Thank you, Worship. I was just thinking, so if I rented a place and it was a 6-month lease, now I have to buy a parking pass from the city for a year, I wouldn't get my $150 back if I was done in 6 months then, right? It's going to be a non-refundable one?
Thank you, Councillor. That is the approach that we use with existing things like dog licensing and what have you, I believe, right? Because we had a discussion on that. We do have the monthly pass option available if this went through.
Yeah.
So if a person, when they get their pass, if they're not confident that they'll be here for a long time, then they can do that option.
And they do get electrical for this, $50 a month. They're actually allowed to plug in all winter.
We haven't dealt with plugins on any of these.
No, and we're not in favor of running cords.
No, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking if these are actual electrical spots or if it's just a parking spot with no electrical.
Yeah, it's a parking spot. It's not designated. We could, depending on how discussions with bid goes, there might be 1 or 2 apartment blocks there where we could, for example, take the parking stalls that are lined up right against the wall of the building and have them, as preferred for residential only, but we haven't had that discussion yet.
No, I guess my question was, does the city have any electrical spots in their parking lot?
In our parking lot, yes, for our people, but this is
No, I'm talking about parking lots that we're talking about right now. None of them are electrified.
No.
Okay, that's all. That's my question. No. Okay.
Yeah, I don't
No,
think
did
so.
you want them electrified, Councillor Vroba?
No, I was just because we're so much more than bid. I was assuming they're obviously getting power.
Okay. Okay, no problem. Okay, any other questions or comments? Councillor Walliser?
Is there currently a limit on how many residential spots we allow within the city-owned parking lots?
We don't have a limit currently. What we have done and what I think at this point, unless we change it, what we'll continue to do, Councillor Walliser, is when I get a proposal in or a request for a parking lot, what I do is I contact bid and say we have a request for a residential parking stall in parking lot E. Is there excess room for that? And if they say yes, then we award the parking pass. If they say no, then I guess we check and see if there's other options available to accommodate the proposed user.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Walliser.
Thank you, Your
Councillor
Worship.
Cernak.
Just maybe as a point of concern, as the city continues to grow, if we're looking at having additional people living downtown, my concern would be that we're going to have additional vehicles parked in those stalls at all times, which then reduces the amount of parking available for people coming downtown to shop. So I don't know how other cities approach that issue. I know when we lived in Saskatoon, we were told as homeowners, you could have one window hook for your personal vehicle, and you could have one for a guest, and there were different rules, but it limited the total amount of vehicles that could potentially fill those spaces.
And that may actually happen here. There's definitely going to have to be in concert with the downtown marketing plan that the city's undertaking. There's going to have to be a land use plan for that, which can be begun as soon as the OCP is done. And if we start planning for above ground, more above ground level or ground floor residential dwellings in the downtown, something I would support in principle, then there definitely will have to be discussions with bid on certain parking lots on what percentage capacity is there for non-commercial traffic.
Okay, Councillor Cernak.
Thank you, Your Worship. Where is an example of a residential city parking lot? Kind of confused on that.
City Manager wants to jump in?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, to Councillor Cernak. So the lot behind where Access Communications is used for that Midtown Plaza behind Parkway Services would be an example of residential parking.
It's one, yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? And I guess it'll kind of be a living document. It may have to be changed moving forward, Richard, but I think it's a great start.
Yes, and there also, depending on what the final form takes up, there may be some bylaw amendments, various parking bylaws and different things that we may have to entertain.
Right. Because as you know, in the past, part of the issue was people staying in the apartments downtown and parking on Main Street and taking parking away from the businesses. So I think this is one thing that could help alleviate that.
Yes, so if this, with this moving forward, once we're in the adoption phase, we'll believe what we'd be doing is sending a notice to the owners of the residential blocks and to the people that have residential cars parked in the, and giving them, 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, saying, these are the rules that are coming in. If you have any questions, call land development, and how they can get their parking passes so that they don't run into any problems. We've been taking a fairly light hand on enforcement at this point because this is something that we've been working on. And we generally, as a rule, don't enforce on people when we have a solution to the issue in the works.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Appreciate that. Keep up the good work. Thanks. Okay, moving forward. Oh, yeah, I guess we should. You'll make that motion? Okay. Councillor Groba?
Yes, I'll make the motion for acceptance and approval as presented tonight, that we approve the fees being $50 a month or $300 per year, non-refundable.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Groba.
And no electricity.
No electricity, thank you.
No electricity.
Have we got a seconder? Councillor Ford. Okay. Ready for the question? All in favor? Carried, thank you. Under introduction of bylaws this evening, we have none. Public hearings and reports, we have none. Giving notice, thank you, City Clerk. Naturopathic Medicine Week, May 16th to the 22nd. Whereas May 16th to the 22nd, 21 is marked as Naturopathic Medicine Week across Saskatchewan and Canada. And whereas naturopathic medicine is a form of primary care medicine that blends century-old, natural, non-toxic therapies with current advances in the study of health and human systems, covering all aspects of family health from prenatal to geriatric care. And whereas naturopathic medicine concentrates on whole patient wellness, the medicine is tailored to the patient and emphasizes prevention and self-care and factors in physical, social, environmental, emotional, and spiritual factors. And whereas more residents of Saskatchewan are seeking science-based, valid, complementary health care, and whereas the mission of the Saskatchewan Association of Naturopathic Doctors is to provide people with the health benefits of regulated, highly qualified, leading-edge naturopathic medicine in Saskatchewan. Now therefore, I, Roy Ludwig, Mayor of the City of Estevan, do hereby proclaim the week of May 16th to 22nd, 2021 as Naturopathic Medicine Week in the City of Estevan, and I urge all citizens of our community to cooperate and participate in activities sponsored by this group. Okay, thank you, City Clerk. Have we got a motion to accept the proclamation? Nobody likes naturopathic? Councillor Cernick likes it, and Councillor Broba. No one else does? Let's see. All in favor? Oh, look, there we go. Awesome. Okay, motions from committee this evening. We have none. Consideration of bylaws. We have bylaw 21-2037, Westview Place, second and third reading. A bylaw to the City of Estevan, pursuant to Section 13 of the Cities Act, to authorize the closure and cancellation of lane right-of-way adjacent to lots 1 to 5, Block 150, Plan AM 7960. Whereas the Council of the City of Estevan has deemed it expedient to legally close the lane right-of-way for purposes of facilitating property subdivision / consolidation of the lane with lots 1 to 5, Block 150, Plan AM 7960, and the City Park lot legally described as Block A, Plan 101, 260, 673. So, have we got second reading this evening for this bylaw? Okay, thank you, Councillor Vroba, seconded by Councillor Clark. Any questions at this time? Okay, seeing no hands raised, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Now could we have a third reading for bylaw 2021-2037 for third reading and adoption for use? Thank you, Councillor Ford, seconded by Councillor Walliser. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Next, inquiries. Councillor Vroba.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually had a few inquiries this last few weeks, and it was both of them were regarding dust control down back alleys. So the City of Estevan does not, for the majority of all back lanes, put any dust control. However, the two residents that did call in, Norm Mack and his crew, were able to satisfy them in another way, so that was good. And so we thank people for bringing their concerns forward instead of feeling that they aren't being heard. It's nice to be heard.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vroba. Councillor Clark.
None tonight, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walliser.
None tonight, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Nothing tonight, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cernick.
Thank you, Worship. I just had an inquiry, and maybe it had to do with, I see in tourism, Estevan was advertising some historical sites throughout the city. So I just had an inquiry about the old school board building / on Henry Street. And the inquirer just would like to see that kind of not torn down in the future and stuff like that. So I just wanted to ask, I don't know where we're at with historical sites within the city, so.
City Clerk, could you just add to that? What's your thoughts on that? I know we had that bylaw came up in September.
Yeah, you can talk to.
Richard, did you want to touch on that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Currently, we have one provincial designated, like formally designated site, that's the courthouse. And we have one municipal site, and that's the Northwest Mounted Police Building site. We have now a historical resources bylaw that's been passed, which allows for, over time, the creation of existing sites. I'm just waiting for people to come forward with applications. The only people in the city that can't make a proposal for historical designation are myself and our building official. The building on Henry Street definitely, I would think, would probably have some historical qualities to it with its history and what have you. But there's been no request on that. We did have an inquiry a year ago about the Anglican Church, and that has been it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Frank? None? Okay, City Manager? None? City Clerk?
Nothing, Your Worship.
Nothing? City Treasurer?
Nothing, Your Worship.
Nothing? City Assessor, thank you for being with us tonight. Did you have any inquiries this evening? None? Okay, thank you again for coming tonight. So do we have a motion to move into committee? Councillor Broba, seconded by Councillor Frank. All in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you so much, and good night.